Today I'm going to be talking about current climate change and the effects of coral reefs by Yukta Mia. So the first slide is climate change and coral reefs. And climate change is the change in the rise of greenhouse gases and how that affects the atmosphere and everything else within that. So greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane are on the increase due to the burning of fossil fuels, among other things. And this affects everything and not just certain things or certain areas in a less way. And some examples of this would be rising temperatures, melting glaciers, rising sea levels, more frequent extreme weathers like droughts and or floods. And these also affect coral reefs through the bleaching of these reefs and irreplaceable damage to not just the reefs but also the surrounding habitats and the animals and everything else that reside within and around these habitats. So we will be looking at 3 different articles, and these 3 articles are peer-reviewed, published within journals. And the first article is the coral bleaching on Jakarta. This study was done on the island of Jakarta off Indonesia, and also the Thousand Islands, which is close to the initial island. And they tagged 42 bleached colonies, and they looked into what affects this bleaching and how this is varied based on the depths, the taxa, the microhabitats, along with they didn't look into depth in this study, but also the gases and other pollutions and pollutants that are there. And of the 42 colonies that they tagged, 36% fully recovered, 26% partially recovered, and 38% just died. And while they were doing their initial look into the area, they found that rapid population growth, insufficient infrastructure, and inadequate waste management led to the dumping of this waste and led to high land-based pollution along with the gas pollution that we emit. And they also looked into the coral bleachings that happened previously before they looked at this, and I believe their research was in 2 stages, and they looked at it within a span of 2 or 3 years. But when they were looking into these coral bleaching events, they found that Park Island was the first recorded in Indonesia, and that was the 1983 bleaching, and then that was followed by 3 other bleachings, 1998, 2010, and 2016. And 2016 is notable because it had the ENSO, which is also the El Nino Southern Oscillation. This is going to be talked about later, so we'll come back to this. But while they were looking, they found results, and they talked about measurement discrepancies, different issues over growth and resilience, and how there could be issues with the way that they're looking at it based on depths and microhabitats and different species and all of this. But moving on, Article 2 is about high temperatures and high nitrate stress. And this article starts off by saying that these coral reefs are home to 35,000 to 60,000 plants and animal species, and they also act as nurseries for fish and provide coastal protection. These coral reefs are really sensitive, and they require low nutrient levels, low phytoplankton growth, and high light penetration. And the researchers found that a lot of nitrate was being dumped into surrounding areas of high population places. And because of this, a lot of nutrients were getting into the ocean, and this was causing the heavy growth of plankton, and it essentially is choking out the coral reefs in a way. And they were talking about a couple different studies that they initially looked at before coming up with their own idea for a study. And they were decided to look at how the nutrients affected this. So what they did was got coral reef clippings from, I believe, Baidong Island, or the research was done on Baidong Island. But they got these clippings and tested 3 different variables, and that was high nitrate, high temperature, and a mix of both. And then they would let this grow and sit in the solutions and check every 12 hours for either 36 or 72 hour period, and they check the zooxanthellae count, or like the density for that. And zooxanthellae is important because whenever coral reefs are growing, the coral has this algae, zooxanthellae, which grows within it, and that is something that will tell you whether the coral reefs are growing well or not. And higher zooxanthellae levels mean there were better growth, they were doing wonderful. And they found that while all 3 tests inhibited the growth of zooxanthellae to some extent, they also saw that, I believe it was nitrate and a mix of both that had the most effect on it. And this obviously affects the coral growth and the general health of all the species of coral, but also all the species that reside within and around these coral reefs. And the last article that I looked at was the impact of the 2023-24 ENSO event on Costa Rica coral reefs. This is where we circle back to the ENSO. And again, a reminder, ENSO means El Nino Southern Oscillation, and this happens every 4 to 7 years with varying intensities, and it happens in the eastern hemisphere, I believe, but it affects the western area too. And it essentially disrupts the water columns and mixes it all up and lowers the thermocline and neutrocline of the area. And since climate change increases water temperatures through carbon dioxide, and the ENSO is happening more and more frequently due to this increase, this combination rises the water temperature past the coral threshold, and it causes more and more coral bleaching. In this article, they did a study, and the study area was focused on the Gulf of Papagayo, and they recorded temperatures and thermal stress data, looked at the benthic cover and fish community data, and they went into detail about the effects and results and everything. But it boils down to the fact that the coral reefs obviously need the ecological and oceanographic insights for its management and conservation strategies, because without the coral reefs, everything that it supports would just die off with it. And the way that human population civilization works, it needs that for fish, food, and to keep the atmosphere stable. So then we go into the conclusion, which, again, we need the coral reefs to keep it stable. And climate change does a great deal of damage. It damages everything, and it's human-led due to the burning of the fossil fuels and all the carbon dioxide that comes out of it and goes into the atmosphere. Again, not great. It needs to be fixed sooner or later, because the effects of that will be felt for many, 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 many hundreds of thousands of years after us. And drastic effects are being done on the coral reefs, which may or may not be repairable with how it's going, and that affects the marine life and affects everything else. It's just a domino effect. And more action should be done to protect these, to undo what's been done, or keep it from happening further. And these are the sources that I used.